Welcome to Latchkey History. And welcome to the story of the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. In March of 1979, the United States was a nation on edge. The country was battling high inflation and a crippling energy crisis. But amidst the anxiety, there was a beacon of high-tech hope. Nuclear power. It was clean, it was efficient, and it was hoped that it would break the nation's dependence on fossil fuels, which at the time primarily fueled the vast national power grids. But, as sometimes happens in life, history too has a peculiar sense of irony. On March 16, 1979, a Hollywood thriller called The China Syndrome was released. The blockbuster film topped the box office, and depicted a cover-up of a near meltdown at a fictional nuclear plant. The industry dismissed the movie as pure fantasy. Strangely enough, however, just 12 days later, fantasy became a terrifying reality on an island in the Susquehanna River in central Pennsylvania. That island was 3 Mile Island. The accident that occurred here froze the American nuclear industry in its tracks, and changed the way we all would think about atomic energy forever. To understand the accident, we need to understand the era. In the late 60s and 70s, nuclear power wasn't just a utility, it was a symbol of American progress. Metropolitan Edison, the company who constructed and ran day-to-day operations in the plant, had selected a site just south of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That site was 3 Mile Island. Named as such because it was located on an island in the Susquehanna River, which was located approximately 3 miles south of the town of Middletown. 3 Mile Island was home to 2 pressurized nuclear water reactors. Unit 1 had been running smoothly since 1974. But Unit 2 was the new kid on the block. It had only begun commercial operation on December 30, 1978, merely 3 months before the accident. The design was sophisticated but, in hindsight, fragile. In a pressurized water reactor, water is heated by the nuclear core but kept under high pressure so it doesn't boil. This superheated water transfers heat to a secondary loop, creating steam to spin a turbine. It's a delicate balance of heat, pressure, and flow to keep the reactor running safely. On the morning of March 28, Unit 2 was running at 97% power. Inside the control room, everything looked normal. But deep in the plumbing of the non-nuclear side of the plant, a minor maintenance issue was about to spiral into a catastrophe. At exactly 4 a.m., a pump that fed water to the steam generators tripped offline. It was a mechanical hiccup, something the system was designed to handle. As planned, the turbine shut down, and the reactor automatically scrambled, meaning the control rods dropped in to stop the nuclear chain reaction. So far, the safety systems were working. But as the pump stopped, pressure in the primary system began to rise. To relieve this pressure, a pilot-operated relief valve, or PRV, popped open. Once the pressure dropped to safe levels, that valve was supposed to close. It didn't. It stuck open, creating a hidden leak. Coolant was pouring out of the reactor core. This was the mechanical failure. But what happened next was the fault that no one predicted. Human error. In the control room, a light on the main panel indicated that the command had been sent to close the valve. The operators believed the valve was closed. In reality, however, it was not. It was wide open. Seeing confusing readings, the operators made a fatal assumption. They thought the reactor was full of water. But the instruments were in effect lying to them. It was not. Believing they had too much water, they manually shut off the emergency cooling pumps. The very same pumps that were now fighting to save the reactor. With the emergency water cut off and the valve still leaking, the water level in the core plummeted. For the first time in the history of commercial nuclear power, the top of a nuclear reactor core was uncovered. The fuel rods, now exposed to intense heat, started to rupture. The zirconium cladding on the fuel reacted with the steam, generating massive amounts of hydrogen gas and heat. The core was melting. By nearly 7 a.m., a new shift of operators arrived. These new operators gathered data and realized the relief valve was actually open. They rushed to close it, stopping the leak, but unfortunately the damage was already done. Radioactive steam had already been vented into the atmosphere. By Friday, March 30th, panic had set in. A hydrogen bubble had now formed inside the reactor vessel. Experts feared it could explode, potentially breaching the containment building and releasing massive radiation across eastern Pennsylvania and the East Coast. Pennsylvania Governor Dick Thornburgh advised pregnant women and preschool-aged children within 5 miles to leave. It wasn't a mandatory evacuation, but it didn't matter. The majority of the general public bolted at hearing the news. In total, over 140,000 people fled the area. At this point, the China syndrome didn't feel like a movie anymore. The turning point came on April 1st. President Jimmy Carter, who was a nuclear engineer in the Navy before his political career, visited the plant personally. By walking into the control room, he showed the public that the situation, while dire, was under control. The hydrogen bubble was eventually vented safely. The reactor cooled. And the immediate crisis ended luckily without a total reactor core meltdown. Everyone was elated at the news that the crisis was averted. However, the cleanup was a nightmare. It took 14 years and cost $1 billion to remove the radioactive fuel and decontaminate the site. In the end, studies showed that the average radiation dose to the 2 million people near the plant was less than a standard chest X-ray. There were no immediate injuries or deaths. But the psychological scar was permanent. 3 Mile Island changed the public's perception of nuclear power forever. The accident led to the creation of the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, and radically overhauled how operators are trained. Safety standards became stricter, and control rooms were redesigned to prevent the kind of confusion that caused the accident. The accident also froze the nuclear industry in its tracks. Following 1979, dozens of planned nuclear plants were cancelled. It would be 30 years before the U.S. approved another new reactor. 3 Mile Island remains a cautionary tale of what happens when complex technology meets human fallibility. It is a reminder that in the atomic age, the margin for error is razor thin. Thank you for watching the story of the accident at 3 Mile Island. And see you next time, on Latchkey History.